Good morning, everybody. I said good morning, everybody. Hey, let's stand and sing together. Let's celebrate. Happy Father's Day to all you dads. It's a great day, beautiful day. Summer. It's awesome. We gather here to celebrate who God is, what He's doing in our lives. We sing out how He's worthy to be praised. Let's sing. Who breaks the power of sin and darkness. Who breaks the power of sin and darkness. Whose love is mighty and so much stronger. The King of glory, the King above all kings. Who shakes the whole earth with holy thunder. Who leaves us breathless with awe and wonder. The King of glory, the King above all kings. This is amazing grace. Come on. This is unfailing love. That you would take my place. That you would bear my cross. You laid down your life. You laid down your life. That I would be set free. Whoa, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. Who brings our chaos back into order. Come on. Who brings our chaos back into order. Who makes the orphan a son and daughter. The King of glory, the King of glory. Who rules the nations with truth and justice. Shines like the sun in all of His brilliance. The King of glory, the King above all kings. Come on. This is amazing grace. This is unfailing love. That you would take my place. That you would bear my cross. You laid down your life. You laid down your life. That I would be set free. Whoa, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. And He's worthy. He's the Lamb that was slain for us. He gave His life that we might have life to the full. Let's sing out. He is worthy. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Come on. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy, worthy, worthy. Oh, this is amazing grace. This is unfailing love. That you would take my place. You would bear. That you would bear my cross. You laid down your life. That I would be set free. Whoa, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. Yeah. He's so good. He's done so much for us. Hey, let's greet one another this morning. Say hi to somebody around you. Somebody new, make them feel welcome.
Findlay's version of Top Golf, as you can see. This is Movement's first ever golf event, and we're gonna have a little fun. We're gonna have some conversation about being a dad, and we're gonna have some competitions as well. So Joe, you said how many times you played golf before?
None.
So I mean, you've got a decisive advantage. Then.
They call that handicap.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think it'd be good to go. And I mean, John, obviously, I mean, other than the Pro Tour that you were on for a while, right?
Right.
And Sam, obviously, this isn't your first rodeo. So, all right, gentlemen. So I think the name of the game for the first round is we're gonna start easy. We're gonna aim who can hit Tomater. First question I have for you: favorite golf movie? Okay, you got 3 options. Best golf movie: Happy Gilmore, Caddyshack, Tin Cup.
Happy Gilmore.
Happy Gilmore?
Absolutely.
Really?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. What for you?
I would choose Tin Cup, but Happy Gilmore would be second.
Okay.
Yeah. That's my hockey stick at home.
I mean, I would probably choose Caddyshack, believe it or not.
Yeah?
I love Tin Cup, though. Second competition, longest drive, Happy Gilmore style.
That's close.
Oh. You go.
No.
Just take one step. Oh, there you go.
There you go. You know, in baseball, they told me I was swatting flies. He lost yardage.
It's not a value. Oh my goodness. Well, you do cut trees down, though. So.
First try.
Dude. Here we go.
Holy cow.
In the spirit of Father's Day, tell me something that your dad, maybe something that your dad taught you how to do that's still something that you enjoy to do because of, you know, your dad invested in you in that way.
So, my dad taught me a lot of patience with house projects, specifically painting.
Man.
I hated it as a child, and you know, my dad would just kind of step in and do it after fighting with me for a while. But just the patience and home remodeling in general, taking pride in what you have and making it look better and taking care of it.
Okay. Tell me one thing you really want to teach them how to do.
I don't know, maybe it sounds too cheesy, but just like to continue learning and growing is one thing, like, you know, not just be stuck with school, but find something you enjoy and pursue it and enjoy it and grow in it.
Yeah, I think too, like, just one of the things I think Sam, you talked about a little bit, but just I try to invest in my kids to teach them, you know, what it looks like to serve and to put other people, you know, before. Like, hey, here's what we do as a family, we serve. So we're always looking for opportunities. All right, John, we got a championship round here. So, so you ready? I brought a couple balls. You're up first.
What are we trying to do?
What's that?
Driver?
Yeah, as hard as you can hit. I want to see.
As hard as I can hit.
Yep.
I feel like I'm being set up.
No.
Smoked it.
Well, I'm not sure how I'm supposed to follow that, but I'm just going to say Happy Father's Day to all the dads here. We're just here and glad that we're celebrating you today. And honestly, I think about my relationship with my dad, and I think about the things that he instilled in me and the ways that he served me and sacrificed for me. And I think about how often he helped out with house projects, similar to what Sam said in the video. But when I first moved into my house, my dad would literally drive up 2 hours to Findlay over and over and over and over to help me with house projects, and to the point that I would get used to showing up after work and he would just be at my house. He would just be there waiting. And so one day I pulled up and said, "Hey Dad, how you doing?" And he goes, "Oh, I'm all right." I'm like, "Oh, just all right today?" He's like, "Yeah, you know, I tried to get started on some stuff while I was waiting for you, and I think maybe, just maybe, I broke my elbow." I'm like, "Dad, how did this happen?" He got on a ladder without any supervision, without any assistance, and proceeded to fall off the ladder in the garage onto his elbow, and indeed did break his elbow. And so I just want to say, for all the dads who put your physical bodies on the line for your kids, we appreciate you. We're so grateful for you, and we're celebrating you today. We have a ton of donuts out in the lobby, so make sure that you get a donut if you didn't get one on your way in. But we're glad to celebrate with you today. And honestly, if this is your first time here, if Father's Day is your first day celebrating with us, we would love to get to know you a little bit better. We would love for you to fill out a Connect card just so that we can know your name and get you plugged in here. Once you fill one of those out, someone will reach out to you so that we can help you get connected in relationship with other people. So make sure, if you haven't filled one of those out before, to go ahead and do that. There's a physical card in the seat back pocket in front of you, or you can scan the QR code with your phone and just fill one out online if that's simpler for you. So go ahead and take a moment to do that. But especially if this is your first time filling one of those out, we're going to donate $5 on your behalf to one of our partner organizations, which is Lifeline Christian Mission. And that's just a way that you can be on mission with us from the very first time that you're here celebrating with us. So make sure to fill one of those out. Even if you've filled one out before, you can fill out any prayer requests, any way that we can be joining you in prayer. We'd love to support you in that way as well. And there's a drop box in the back here and one out in the lobby for those physical cards if you don't fill it out online. And also, we want to give you a ton of opportunities to just connect in community here. So I wanted to point you to something that's happening in just a few weeks. On Sunday, July 3rd, we're going to have our summer celebration. So this will look a little bit different from our typical Sunday. We'll gather at 10:30 that morning, and we'll worship together, but we'll also have games outside. We will have food. So invite neighbors, invite friends. It's a family-friendly gathering, so make sure to join us for that. It'll just be a really fun time to celebrate summer together. So make sure to mark that on your calendar, and remember 10:30, so it'll look a little bit different than our typical Sunday. But we hope to see you there. And again, my name is Ellen, if I didn't mention it earlier, but I want to get to know you a little bit better, especially if you're here for the first time. So I'll be out in the Next Steps area after this, and I would love to have a conversation with you if we haven't met before. So make sure to come and find me, and I have a gift for you if you're new also. But for right now, we will continue in our time of celebrating together.
Well, it's already been said a bunch, but happy Father's Day. So glad that you're here celebrating with us. I'm going to do a couple things here as we get going. First off, if you're watching online, guys, if you're on like hole number 7 and you're watching online, just know, happy Father's Day. Glad you're tuning in. Hey, on a serious note, well, not really, but all right, here we go. My shirt says Girl Dad, by the way. All right, there we go. I didn't tell people that, yeah, right? And I didn't tell people, I also have one that says Dog Dad, but I felt like maybe you'd think less of me, so I went with Girl Dad. People are trying to figure out in the first, celebration what my shirt said. I never told anyone. They said, we thought maybe it said Air Dad, and I thought, yeah, that's fitting, yeah. Anyways, I'll just keep rolling here for a minute. Ellen, I want to correct you on a couple things. Dads do not need supervision on a ladder, all right? We know how a ladder works, all right? My goodness. In the top, you can stand on the top level. Don't listen to this. Anyways, all right. And also, we had a ton of donuts, but I seem to have went on an eating competition, and so I think there are fewer. I've had let's just say a third of a dozen, so if I crash of a sugar buzz or whatever up here, if I'm talking fast, someone else has had like 6 or 7 at this point, so I feel all right. But I hope you got a donut. This is like the best day because there's donuts, and the worst day because there's donuts, right? Because donuts are awesome, and yet present some challenges to some of us. But just for the sake of today, why don't you tell, because, you could yell it out loud, but I want to know what your favorite donut is, or at least the person next to you really wants to know, so you just take a second, make sure we're all together here this morning. What's your favorite donut? You can just go ahead, take a minute, take a second, not a minute, you don't need a minute. You should know this. You should know this, right? Yeah. Listen, it's 2 words. The words are plain glazed, right? That's all I got to say. Plain glazed. Like, listen, all right, seriously, all right, I know you guys are trying to figure this out. Like, if you said anything other than plain glazed, you're wrong, but that's all right. Here's the deal. A donut should be able to stand on its own, right? And if you still have to add a bunch of extra stuff, then it's not standing. Okay, anyways, we'll go on from that. It's only fitting. Today is, we're in the series Detours, and I think about detours. I think about being a dad, but even more than that, as I think about Father's Day, it's really fitting that we're in this series. And I think there are a couple levels to that. We talked about detours being an unexpected or longer path, right? That's what a detour is. The first week of this series, we're 3 weeks in. First week, we just said a detour is an unexpected or longer path. That's just the definition, a simple definition of detours. And as I think about that when it comes to my dad, that really is true in a lot of different ways. On one level, it's true, unexpected, 2015, I lost my dad, and talk about a detour. I wasn't ready for that in my life, and it's just one of those times or seasons I look back on and think, man, that really changed a lot of things. I had plans and certain things that I wanted to do that I wasn't able to do, and I know this. Some of you in here, you're in that place, right? Like maybe you've lost your dad. Some of the challenge and some of the pain and just some of the grief that comes with that, or you've lost someone else in your life. And you just know it brings about a lot of change, and you navigate through that. And so on one level, I think about that when it comes to detours and Father's Day. On another level, I think about detours, because it's an unexpected or longer path. And I think about my dad. My dad was the king of detours, all right? Now, I think about just him driving, and what I will tell you is the unexpected part, that wasn't necessarily true, right? It was the longer path part that held true in my dad's life. When I was in college, I went to school in Knoxville, Tennessee, and then after that, we lived in Cincinnati for a couple years, so we got really good at driving down I-75 south, and I remember when my dad, a couple times when I was with my dad, and then just hearing stories beyond that. My dad would get to Dayton, and he'd be over in the passing lane, because that's where Dad lived, was in the passing lane, and he'd be in that lane, and my mom would forewarn him, like, hey, the left lane, it's an exit in Dayton. Remember, it takes you to Xenia. I think it's 35, State Route 35, something like that. I should know, because what would happen inevitably is my dad would say, oh, I know, no. And he'd, because that's what dads do, right? We say we know when we don't know. And so, he would be in that lane, and then sure enough, my mom would mention again, and he'd start to get a little frustrated. And then he'd get off and go to Xenia. So that would happen. Then he'd get frustrated. Then my mom would try to help him understand, well, you knew it was coming, and why didn't you listen? And then you get mad, and then I'd laugh, all right? And that was kind of it was like this systematic, cyclical thing that would happen. And so that became part of our story. We know how to get to Xenia very well. Actually, I'm heading there, close to there this week to drop some kids off for camp. So I know how to get there, all right? So anyways, here's what we're doing as we look at detours. Here's what we're walking through. In this series is we're looking at our lives and going, what do we do when things don't go as planned? And I'm guessing what's true for me is true for you, and that is there are a lot of things in my life that haven't necessarily gone as planned. And I'm assuming that's true. I'm hopefully seeing some head nods. Because I would say most of us, right? I mean, for instance, Girl Dad, right? Did not go as planned. I thought, like I said, week one, I'd have 2 boys, tag team champions in the WWE. But nevertheless, things don't always go as planned in your life and in my life. And sometimes detours are the best thing that could ever happen to us. But what we know is our lives aren't necessarily just a straight line up and to the right, correct? It doesn't just, go that way, but rather it twists and it turns, and there's setbacks, and there's ups and downs, and sometimes we seem like we're going backwards. And so what do we do about all of that? Because here's what I think happens so often is we experience a detour or maybe a set of detours, and what so often happens is we become angry, we get frustrated, perhaps we play the pity game, right? The poor me game. Maybe we lose faith, even, God, where are you? Why aren't you? What if? We start to do the what if question, and we have all these different responses when we're in detours, but so many of them are really, I think take us down a road that's not necessarily healthy and doesn't get us to where a detour can and could get us. In fact, that's the series is about seeing detours from a different perspective, and that is a perspective that maybe God wants to use this to shape and refine you. And so we just said a working big idea or definition for this series would be a detour is a change in our plans that God uses, that he uses to develop our character or our competency in order to help us arrive at a better place. And what if we started to see our detours not as a setback, but rather we saw our detours as an opportunity for God to really develop and build our character and our competency so that we can end up in a place that really is that's truly better. And in order to do that, what we're looking at in the series is the life of a guy by the name of Joseph. And Joseph is his story is found in the book of Genesis and chapters 37 through 50. And Joseph is like the poster child for a detour, right? His life, if you were to say whose life twisted and turned and had setbacks and who found themselves in places that they never thought they would be. I mean, Joseph's our guy. And you listen to his story and you think, this can't be real because it's just out there, right? This isn't just bad luck. This isn't he made a mistake and here he is. I mean, his story is full of all of these twists and these turns and unexpected places that he finds himself in. And so we first read about Joseph. He's 17 years old. He's a little bit prideful, perhaps a little arrogant. He's dad's favorite. He's set to inherit a double blessing or double portion. He's got a bunch of brothers, and they don't really like him a whole lot, probably because of his place within the family. But then on top of that, he goes from bad to worse because he actually shares with them that he has this dream where all of his siblings, all of his brothers are going to bow down to him. And, it just doesn't go all that well for Joseph at that point. And so his brothers, they're going to kill him, but instead they throw him in this pit and they wait a while and then they sell him into slavery. And they basically, make it look like he died, tell their dad that he's died. And they sell him into slavery. And his first detour is that he finds himself 300 miles away in the nation of Egypt in slavery, okay? What we talked about last week is once he arrives there, and after a while, he's actually bought by a guy named Potiphar, who's this ruler within, this person of significance within Egypt. I mean, he's not the man, but he's a high-standing person. And he finds himself in Potiphar's house. He also must have found himself a Planet Fitness because he's like chiseled at this point. He's working out. Free membership in the summer if you're under 18, by the way. But anyways, I tried to play that, didn't work. Anyways, so he is in great shape. Potiphar's wife, she decides she wants him in her life and in a more than friend way, and tries to set him up for that. Joseph, he fights it off. He remains faithful. He does the right thing. He honors God. He says, I can't do this. He honors his master Potiphar. And in the end, she frames him, and she lies about him, and that he's put a move on her. And in all of that, Potiphar has Joseph thrown into prison. So welcome to detour number 2, right? So moving from a place of prominence, this double blessing within your family, to being sold into slavery and moved to Egypt, and now he finds himself in prison, and that's where we're going to catch up with Joseph today and his story. And so it's like, okay, God, what are you trying to do in Joseph's life, and what can we learn from that? And so let's just jump into Genesis chapter 39. That's where we're at today. And like I said, Joseph is now in prison, and I love the very first words that we hear about him being in prison. Check this out in verse 20 of chapter 39. It says, but while Joseph was there in prison, the Lord was with him. And I think this is so important. And the reason it's important, I'm guessing maybe it's true for you. I know As I hear that Joseph's in prison and the Lord is with him, I think there's a piece of me that struggles and maybe is a little confused by what all this represents, right? Like, is this confusing to you? And the reason I ask that is, sometimes in our lives, I think, it's easy to see God is with us when things are going well, but when we find ourselves in this favorable situation, like, where's God? And I think about it in Joseph's situation. I mean, here Joseph is, he was thrown into prison for doing what? For doing the right thing. And he does the right thing, and the reward is not what you would want it to be, right? The reward is, here you go. I'm going to throw you in prison. And I think about that in our lives. Like, maybe you've been there before where you felt like you've tried to do the right thing. You try to be a person of character, a person of integrity. You try to love people the way that you felt you should. You tried to have pure motives and really a pure heart in the way that you go about living your life. And then you find yourself in a place where that's not rewarded, right? Where you do the right thing and it doesn't get you where you want to be. And it's easy to kind of stop and go, God, where are you in this? And I think about the detours. I don't know what your prison is. Maybe you're in the middle of a detour. We said this in week 1, that you're either coming out of a detour, you're in a detour, or you're going to experience a detour. Like, those are kind of the 3 stages that we find ourselves in. And we said in week 1 that you're probably in one of those places. But if you're in a detour right now, I know how easy it can be to feel like God's maybe abandoned you, right? Like, God, I did my part. Where are you at? And I just think about the promise that's found in this passage, this truth that is true in Joseph's life, but I think I believe with all my heart that this is a true statement, and that is that God has not left you. And I think for many of us in here, if we heard one thing this morning, I think maybe the words "God has not left you" would be the most important words that you could hear. Because, you see yourself in a situation where maybe God seems absent, where God just doesn't seem to be all that real or relevant in your life. And what we see in Joseph's story is even when he's in prison, even when he finds himself in a bad spot that was completely maybe out of his control, God has not left him. Jesus actually tells his followers, if you're a follower of Jesus, here's what Jesus says in Matthew 28, right? He says, go make disciples, and he's kind of pointing to this idea, like, I want you to live your life on mission for me, everywhere you go, everything you do. And then he says, surely I'll be with you always, even to the end of the age. And I think about the truth of that statement, like, Jesus just says, look, I'm going to be with you. And one of the things I think is the first thing that goes so often in our walk with God when when we find ourselves in the valley is we think God has left us. I just want you to hear, God has not left you. That's so important in Joseph's story. And so here's what we read next. It says, while Joseph was there in prison, the Lord was with him. Here's what we read next. He showed him kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. And I just went, like, you see the significance of this, right? Like, I think about the fact that Joseph's world is turned upside down, and yet God is with him, and he shows him, and get this, he even shows him kindness and grants him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. I just think there are times where we're in a tough spot, and it's not easy. And the easy thing to do would be to think that God's left you. The easy thing to do would be to throw the towel in, to blame God, to say, man, And what we may miss in that season is that God actually wants to show his kindness to you and give you favor even in the midst of some really tough stuff. Some of us have found ourselves in a prison of some sort, maybe not a physical, literal prison, but a season in our life where because we failed to see it, we missed how God's kindness was all over that situation, right? God's kindness to give you strength or favor or, provide in ways that maybe you never saw possible. But what happens is we so often miss this. And so we're going to read on. Genesis chapter 40, it says this, sometime later, the cupbearer and the baker, the king of Egypt, offended their master, the king of Egypt. And so Pharaoh was angry with his two officials, the chief cupbearer, the chief baker, and the candlestick maker. And he put them, that's the butcher, the baker, that's different. So he put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard in the same prison where Joseph was confined. Now, a couple things real quick. First thing is, these weren't just like, the baker wasn't working at Kroger making birthday cakes, all right? Like, and not anything against, but this was like, these people, the cupbearer and the baker in the king's quarters were like his secret service, right? They were people that protected the king. I mean, they truly were there to look out. They were part of his inner circle. And so something's happened, right, where these people have, like, maybe they didn't hold up their end of the bargain, whatever. The king of Egypt, the Pharaoh, he's upset at them, and so he throws them in prison, and it just so happens that they're thrown in the very same place where Joseph was confined. And so this is what we see next. It says, the captain of the guard assigned them to Joseph, and Joseph, he attended to them. And I love this because I think about the fact that Joseph's in prison, and yet he's promoted, right? Like, Joseph is promoted and given this job to oversee other prisoners. And I think about that because seems like every step along the way, every step that Joseph takes, and he finds himself in tough spots, right? Like, he gets sold into slavery, not a good spot to be in. What happens? He ends up at Potiphar's house, and Potiphar, because Joseph is faithful and he serves and he's willing to step in, he finds favor, and he's moved in this place of leadership. And then he's in jail, and it's like, man, but Joseph, the way he handles himself in that situation, he's put in positions of leadership. All I really want you to hear in that is, even when you find yourselves in a bad spot, God wants to use you to be a person of influence. Even when you don't see how that could possibly be because you feel like you don't have any, God wants to use you as a person of influence. He truly does. Like, some of the places that God has used me the most as a leader are not the expected places, right? It's not, here on a Sunday or leading a team or organization. The places God's used me as a leader sometimes the most are places that I never wanted to be or anticipated I'd be in. And I think the same thing can be true for you as it is for me. And so that's what we read. It says in verse 4, it says, after they had been in custody for some time, each of the two men, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were being held in prison, had a dream the same night, and each dream had a meaning of its own. So when Joseph came to them the next morning, he saw that they were dejected, and so he asked Pharaoh's officials who were in custody with him in the master's house, why do you look so sad today? Now, just think about this for a minute. Think back. We say detours help us develop and they build character and competency. Like, 17-year-old Joseph was so self-consumed, with himself and in his place within his family and all that. I think 17-year-old Joseph, he may have missed this, but 28-year-old Joseph, right? This is like 10 or 11 years later where Joseph finds himself in prison. And now I think he's developed some character and some ability to see things differently. And now he's looking beyond himself, and he's seeing circumstances and people beyond himself. And he sees these two individuals, and he sees that they're sad. They're something's going on. And so he says, like, what's going on? Here's the second thing I want you to see in that. I think, man, this is so true. I think when we're so focused on ourselves that we fail to pursue and pursue God and see God in our lives, what so often happens is we fail to see the needs of other people around us, right? Like, we're so consumed with our circumstance, we're so consumed with what is or isn't happening, in our lives, that we fail to see the needs of other people around us. But when we fix our eyes, when we focus on God, when we focus on who God is and what he has for us, here's what the first thing I think that so often happens is we begin to see other people as God sees them. And so therefore, what happens is we begin to serve people as God loves and serves and cares for us. We get to be a part of his mission. So much so, whenever whenever I walk with people through difficult seasons where they just seem to be struggling and life just doesn't seem to be going as it should, what often happens is people are going, "Hey, can you help me?" And they want me to help them through the season, and I want out of this circumstance. And what I often point people to is, "Hey, I think you really need to serve some other people," right? Like, what would it look like for you to, like, remove the focus from yourself, put the focus on God, and going, "God, how can I love other people? How can I love them in such a way that it reflects your love?" And in the process of that, right, we grow. We'll talk more about this later because I think there's a lot of power in this. So we'll get there. But here's what we read next. It says in Genesis 40, verse 8, it says, "We both had dreams." So they answered to Joseph. They said, "We both had dreams, but there's no one to interpret them." And the Hebrew for this word interpret, like the literal translation would be this idea of making sense of. The baker and the cupbearer say, "We had these dreams, but we can't make sense of it, and there's no one here that can help us make sense of these dreams." And I don't think this is just an issue with these two guys, right? Like, here's their circumstance. They found themselves in a detour of their own, right? They're in a detour. And so that's where they find themselves in this detour, and they just can't make sense of it. They can't understand why. Been there? Marriage falls apart. Why? Your child goes in a direction that you never thought that they would. Why? Trying to make sense of it. You lose your job. Why? Lose a loved one. Trying to make sense of this. This doesn't seem fair. Like, I think so often we try to make sense of things, and it's like, man, how do we make sense of it? It just, we can't get there. And my guess is some of you are on a detour right now in your life, and you just can't make sense of it. And so Joseph responds to them, and here's what he says. He says, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams." Joseph looks at these two guys and says, hey, don't you know that the one person that can make sense of this is God? So why don't you let me in on what's going on? Because he didn't say, now notice what Joseph doesn't say. "Hey, let me have a stab at it." He says, "Doesn't this belong to God?" Hear me out on this. I think for a lot of us, as we walk through tough seasons in our life, we try to make sense of things, and we try to make sense of it in a lot of random ways, right? Like some of us, we have something happen in our lives, and we're like, okay, well, I'm gonna throw this out on social media and see if some people can help me make sense of this. And then you're spinning around as you get all these different answers and all these explanations and all this stuff. Or maybe it's like, okay, like I'm gonna, I don't know, maybe I'm gonna, read my horoscope. Maybe I'm just going to follow my feelings. I'm going to just look at the news. I don't know. But what so often happens is we look everywhere except to the person, our creator, the person that created the heavens and the earth. We look everywhere except there to make sense of what we're walking through. And Joseph's like, hey, I think it'd be wise if you started with the one person who can make sense of it all. Well, so they tell Joseph their dreams. And I'm just going to give you a little summaries of their story. They tell Joseph their dreams, and Joseph, he's able to help them make sense of it, right? God gives them that ability. Joseph's a dreamer. And Joseph to the cupbearer says, hey, I got good news for you. In 3 days, you're gonna be restored. Like Pharaoh's gonna, restore your relationship with him. You're gonna be put back in your spot. And he says, when that happens, he says, when that happens, hey, don't forget about me. Remember that guy that told you what was going to happen, right? Like, help me out. Help a brother out. And then he tells the baker, he tells him, like, I've got some news for you. It's not so great. You're going to die. All right, so I guess you want to be the cupbearer. All right, so, and sure enough, like, that's what happens. That exact thing happens, right? It happens just as Joseph said it would. But the problem is the cupbearer, he forgets about Joseph. And so Joseph remains in prison for the next couple years, and well, eventually we'll carry on with this story. But I just want to take a few minutes and speak from the heart about a couple of things, actually 3 things that I think about detours that are really, really important for us today. And I really believe that, man, as I don't know about you, but I've had some conversations lately. God seems to be putting the pieces in place for times just like this and in my life. And so I just want to share those with you. It's funny, as you begin to live in something for a while, you see how God starts to make, kind of put the pieces together in some really significant ways. And that's happened in my life lately. I want to share some thoughts I have on detours with you that we can learn from Joseph's story, but also truly just some experience I've had on my own as well. And so here are 3 things. I hope these can help you. The first one is just this: your circumstances must be interpreted through God's lens or perspective. All right. Now, like I said, God seemed to be aligned. A couple weeks ago, I was meeting with someone from Movement, a guy by the name of Dan. Some of you know Dan, but I sat down with Dan at the coffee shop, and he starts this conversation. And the first thing he starts talking to me about is the difference between perception and perspective. Okay? And he says, hey, look, your perception is, as we break down the Latin and some of the root of this word perception, your perception is one point of view, right? It's one point of view. It's very linear, and the focus is on you. The focus is on me. That's different from perspective, because perspective, although also has to do with our view, has to do with this idea of multiple viewpoints. Perspective is about multiple points of view, where perception focuses on me, perspective focuses on we. It sees things from different points of view. It helps us to see a bigger angle. And I don't know about you, but does anyone else in here struggle with oftentimes just seeing things from it's all about perception, and it's all about one perspective even for that, right? Like yours, right? Anyone else? I'll just tell you, I did that this morning already. I told you that if you like anything other than glazed donuts, you're wrong, right? That's my perception, that anything else is not right. And I just rode with it, because for me, that's my view, and how could anyone else view things? Now, anyone, you don't have to raise your hand in this. I know this would be really, Anyways, for those of us that struggle a little bit with control, we like to be in control, we oftentimes struggle with this idea of our perception, right? Because when we view everything as how we see it, then we feel like we're in control. And so what we do is we like to control things by, saying, well, this is the way it has to be. Now, if you ever want to learn how to understand that there's more than one point of view, all you really have to do is get married, all right? Now, when we first, when Kate and I first got married, I was so thrilled, because I knew that I was going to be spending the rest of my life with someone that saw everything exactly how I saw it, all right? So that's humor, by the way. So, yeah, there's a laugh, all right. Yeah, because that's not true, right? You think it is, but that's not true. That's not how the world works. And honestly, that's certainly not how men and women work, right? Because men, we have boxes. Everything is in a compartmentalized, and it's like, okay, I got my work box and my family box and my hobby box, and we even have a nothing box, right? That's that box where we just, we don't think about it, we're not doing it. In fact, some ladies in here, you get mad because you're like, hey, what's going on? What are you thinking about? What are you doing? Oh, nothing, right? And you get mad because you know that's not, possible. It is possible, all right? We think about nothing. And so you get married, and all of a sudden you realize, guys, we're very compartmentalized. Ladies, you're oftentimes very, things are intertwined, intermixed. You can actually hold more than one thought at the same time. I can't do that, but you can. And so what would happen is early on in our marriage, I had to learn that we could actually see things different, and I had to change my understanding or my viewpoint. And sometimes what that meant was when I asked my wife, "Hey, are you doing okay? Are you all right?" And she says, "Yeah, I'm fine." And I'd be like, "Cool, like awesome." Yeah, that's not necessarily the case, right? So, So perception, perspective. Now, let's build this out a little bit. Because God wants a relationship with you and with me. He invites us into a relationship, and any relationship has multiple points of view. And all I will tell you is the way God sees things is probably a little bit different than we do oftentimes, all right? For instance, we read about this in Isaiah 58. This is God speaking, all right? So here, we'll just hold on to this. He says, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." Now, think about that for a minute. Because every one of us, I think, has the tendency to view our understanding of God or who God is and his goodness and his character and all that by our limited point of view, from like how we see things. And what we read in the book of Isaiah is, guess what? God's a lot bigger than us, right? God, the creator and sustainer of the universe, God doesn't see time the way we see time. God doesn't see people oftentimes the way we see people. God's ways are bigger. God doesn't see your circumstance, this momentary circumstance. He doesn't see it in the same way that you do, right? Because he's bigger. Just yesterday, I was watching the U.S. Open on TV for a little bit because I locked myself out of the house and I'm not smart enough to carry a key. So I was watching on my phone, and so I'm watching this, and they pan out to this blimp view of Boston, all right? It's in Boston. And I see these skyscrapers, and I see these people, and I see this metropolitan, like, massive people. And I'm like, man, that's so big. And then I'm like, yeah, and that's one city, right? In the midst of a country that's so big, in the midst of a world that's so big. And then I'm like, man, and that's like one moment in time, like right now, but this is thousands of years, that people have walked. And all of a sudden, your perspective starts to change and go, man, God's bigger than my circumstance, my situation that I find myself in. In our detours, in order to really get through this, we have to understand that God's bigger than that. All right. Second thing is this, I think, and that is training for greater things often takes place in the lesser things. I'm not saying that jail wasn't bad for Joseph. What I'm saying is God was preparing him for something greater. Even interpreting these dreams for the baker and the cupbearer. Okay, eventually the cupbearer remembers Joseph, right? And Pharaoh has some dreams, and Joseph interprets those dreams, and Pharaoh removes him from jail and puts him in the second place of authority, like this place of prominence. Like Joseph saves the lives of a bunch of people, and sometimes it's because if you're faithful in the small things, right, God prepares you for greater things. And that may be true in your life right now. That you're going through a season of small trials that maybe even seem big to you, and perhaps God is in the midst, in the process of preparing you for something great. If we'll only recognize that God is with us. I heard this quote, and I just thought it's so good. I just want to share it with you as I think about this. You can either go through a valley or you can grow through a valley. And I think God wants to develop you in this season. He's preparing you through lesser things for greater things. My good friend Doug, he's a part of Movement. About 5 years ago, he shared with me this illustration that he had of turning sap into syrup. Okay, now I'm not I love maple syrup. I'm like Elf, but I've never made it. All right, but he says basically, you take I think it's 10 or 20 gallons of sap from a tree, right? Makes half a gallon of syrup, right? Because you've got to boil it down and refine it. It's refined by fire. You boil out all the impurities and imperfections, and it's this process of refinement. The Bible talks all about refinement. In fact, the book of 1 Peter talks about other places as well. But like I think when we go through some of these challenges and some of these, will we trust God? Will we be faithful? Will we pursue what he has for us? Will we realize that God has not left us? He's refining us and helping us to build us into people that he wants to use for something great and something significant. So that's number 2. Number 3, and this is where I want to just live for a minute. For me, I think 1 and 2 are important, but this to me, man, I'm learning this in my life in so many ways, and I pray this for you, and it is this: no matter what, God is enough. Okay. No matter what, God is enough. I don't know what detour you're on. No matter what, God is enough. And I would just tell you, like, this is my heart, church. I think about this so often. Like I said, God's building in me. So this last past Sunday, so not today, obviously, but last Sunday, I had the opportunity. Dwayne, who's a part of Movement, invited me. He serves in a prison ministry. He serves for a prison ministry down in Lima, and he invited me to go down to the penitentiary in Lima and be a part of this the celebration after a weekend. They have these like weekend retreats for people for inmates that they can, it's a spiritual retreat where they can basically discover who God is and what he's doing in their lives. And, it's just really powerful stuff. It's pretty cool what God's doing in that. So anyways, I go, I don't know what to expect when I go down there, but I'm like, okay, I'm just going to go support Dwayne, and I'm along for the ride. And, so I walk in there, and they have during the this ceremony, they have times where all the people that went through this program get to share their story. They get to share their story of what God's done through their experience. And I'm listening to the stories of these prisoners sharing about the forgiveness that they found, about the hope that they have, about the peace that they've experienced, and about the purpose that they're finding. And I'm listening to these, some of them have been in prison. There was one individual that had been in prison for 42 years. There's another person that looked like he was about 22, all right, who was going to spend, unless something earth-shattering, unless the unthinkable happened, he knew that he would be spending the rest of his life in prison. That's where he was going to find himself. And I'm hearing these prisoners share their stories and the hope that they have. And what was so fascinating is not one of them was sharing about, I sure hope that God changes my circumstances and gets me out of this place, and then I know that God's with me. And I just, as I was there, God was just speaking into my life, saying, these people know that their detour may be a detour for the rest of their life on this earth, and yet they found joy, and they found peace, and they found forgiveness, and they have hope, and they're finding purpose, and they're saying, God, you can use me in here, even if I'm never out of here, you can use me here. And I thought, man, God, I just want to be a person that is able to say, God, you're enough. Even if my circumstance doesn't change, even if the situation doesn't improve, even if the greater things that you have for me are in the midst of some really horrible things that may never change, even in all of that, God, you're enough. I think about the song, there's a song that says, my hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. And the power of those words are simply, look, our hope, our determination of whether life's good or whether God's with us, whether any of that is not built on any circumstantial thing. It's not built on how good, because it's just built on the fact that I can rest in God's love because Jesus gave up everything so that I could have everything. And there's nothing that I can do to earn that. There's nothing that I can do to be a better, to make sure that I can try hard like Joseph. I can work really hard at that. But if I just don't rest in that, God, you're enough, man, I've missed it. Church, this is what I want. That's what I want for you. That's what I pray for you. So I just want to ask, would you just join me in prayer today as we wrap up today, and look forward to going more in Joseph's story, but would you pray with me? God, I pray that this would be a season where we just discover the power and the freedom and that you're enough. And man, God, I don't know. Some of us are walking through some junk right now, and it's heavy. Some of us are hurting. Some of us feel like we're never going to get out of this situation. God, you're enough. God, you demonstrated you're enough through Jesus. And if we have received life through him, then we have everything that we need, whether on this life or not. God, give us perspective beyond today. Give us perspective beyond tomorrow. Give us perspective beyond this earth. Give us perspective that matches this understanding that we have hope in eternity and life forever with you, and that your kingdom is bigger than just ourselves. God, give us perspective that's bigger than our perception. Man, God, I just pray that we would rest in the words that you're enough. God, help us to discover that more. Help that those not just be words spoken, but the reality in our lives. God, would your spirit move so that we can experience that? And I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Well, let's stand and sing together, shall we? The difference between whether we're going to go through a valley or grow through a valley is if we recognize that God is with us. I've seen your grace from the mountain. I've seen your grace from the mountain. I've felt you there in the valley below. I see your love and your mercy. You're guiding me home. I know you're in every season. I know you're in every season. I feel your hand bringing peace and control. Jesus, your love is my anchor. You're my only hope. You're my only hope. And I will trust. And I will trust in you. I will not be moved. High on the mountain, I will be lifting my voice, and in the valley I will be dancing for joy in every season. You are worthy in every moment. You're wonderful. You're wonderful. You are my light and salvation. Come on, every voice. My God is with me. There's nothing to fear. Jesus, our hope, our redemption. Your presence is here. Your presence is here. And I will trust in you. I will not be moved. High on the mountain, I will be lifting my voice, and in the valley I will be dancing for joy in every season. silent, our hearts on fire. Jesus, our victory. This sound of triumph, this song inside us. Jesus, our victory. We won't be silent, our hearts on fire. Jesus, our victory. The sound of triumph, this song inside us. Jesus, our victory. You're our victory. High on the mountain, I will be lifting my voice, and in the valley I will be dancing for joy in every season. You are worthy in every moment. You're wonderful. High on the mountain, I will be lifting my voice, and in the valley I will be dancing for joy in every season. You are worthy in every moment. You're wonderful. You're wonderful. You're wonderful. My foes are many, they rise against me, but I will hold my ground. I will not fear the war, I will not fear the storm. My help is on the way, my help is on the way. And oh my God, He will not delay. My refuge and strength, always I will not fear. I will not fear. His promise is true. My God will come through. Always, always, yeah. Trouble surrounds me, chaos abounding. My soul will rest in you. I will not fear the war, I will not fear the storm. My help is on the way. Sing it out! My help is on the way. And oh my God, He will not delay. My refuge and strength, always I will not fear, and I will not
about you, but I'm just really grateful that we're walking through this message series together. And I think it's true for a lot of us that we could really use that shift in perspective, that it's so easy to look at our circumstances and allow that to determine whether or not we think that God is present with us. And we use our circumstances as a gauge of whether or not He's faithful. And that's just not accurate. Like, God is good and He's with us in every circumstance. And as a church, we just want you to have opportunities to just declare that God is enough. And I think there's so many ways that we get to do that with our lives, and a lot of it has to do with like just living with an open hand and releasing that need for control. And I think so often when we want to make sense of our circumstances, we try to grasp onto control in a lot of different ways. And so part of the reason that every week when we gather, we invite you into generosity is because that's one way that we just tell God that He's enough, that we say, God, I trust you no matter my circumstance, whether it looks like I have enough or don't have enough, whether it's what I expected or not. Like, God, I just trust you. And so we want you to have an opportunity to step into generosity today if that's your step of responding to God and being active and saying, God, you're enough for me. There's an envelope in front of you that you can use, or you can scan the QR code with your phone to give. But I think that's just one of the many ways that we get to declare that God's enough for us in any circumstance. And so just invite you into that. I hope that you'll take that step and that we can grow in that together. But again, it's just been really great to celebrate together and to be with you today. And if I haven't met you, I would love to have a chance to talk with you. I'll be at the Next Steps area after this. Make sure to grab some donuts on your way out. And just remember that as we gather in this place, as we worship God, we gather so that we can be sent from here, so that we can be sent to be the church to the people around us. So I pray that movement, as you leave from this space, remember to go and be the church.